I think the big question when asked to speak here was, how do you become relevant in today's world? And you think about relevance. Is it political relevance? Is it social relevance? Is it economic relevance? And you'll see I focused in a little bit different area. I think what we want to talk about is, how do people see you? How do people see you in the context of being relevant in your own world? And I think that the challenge here is, are you seen as a pawn, or are you seen as a king or a queen? And relevance is not about how famous you are. Your relevance is not about whether or not you have a high social media profile. Relevance is about how important you are and how valuable you are to different people who are important to you. And I think that's what we begin to focus on, is what can interfere with your relevance? What can get in the way of your relevance? And we talk a little bit about VUCA. And so let me talk a little. I don't know how many of you have heard the expression VUCA, but VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And think about your own life, and think about your own careers. There's a certain amount of unpredictability in everything around you and everything around us. That's the volatility. So how do you factor in your relevance relative to the volatility? How do you factor in your relevance in terms of uncertainty? How do you factor in relevance? We've been hearing about AI. How do you factor in your relevance versus today's complexity? How do you compute your own relevance relative to ambiguity, the uncertainty? You see so many facts, you see so much knowledge, you see so much information. How do you sort it all out? These are the issues that really affect how people see you. And remembering that in a professional context, and always think context before content. We live in a society where so many people spend so much time focusing on content. But in truth, what's only important is establishing the context first, so that everyone understands the value of the content. So when you think about your relevance, begin to think about, where does the reciprocity live? Where does the reciprocity live between communication, connectivity, and trust? If I was going to treat today like a cooking class on how do you cook up relevance, I would say that there are three primary ingredients. And the three primary ingredients are communication, connectivity, and trust. So let's look at communication first. Communication is not about speaking and writing. Communication is about getting people to listen. So do you speak to be heard, or do you speak to be listened to? 95% of the world hears, 5% listens. 95% of the world hears, and 5% listens. So what does that mean? It means that 95% of the world listens to reply, not to understand. Do you listen to reply, or do you listen to understand? So if you're focusing on communication, it's not to be heard, it's to be listened to. So how do you get your audience to become active listeners? There are fundamentally two ways. One is the Socratic method. I'm sure all of you at one point studied the Socratic method. The Socratic method, 3,500 years ago, Socrates said, the only way I can teach is by asking questions. Because questions don't speak to the ears, questions speak to the ego. Think about when you're asked a question, the first decision you have to make is whether you want to answer it. If any of you have kids, you know that no matter whether you're in the Dominican Republic or South Africa or the United States or China, kids always have the same response. I don't know. Right? I don't know. If you wait 10 seconds, you'll be surprised that they actually do know. And they will give you an answer. But the power of asking questions can't be overemphasized. You know, I was never a good student, and there's probably no reason for me actually to have been invited to be here today. But the difference is, at a rather young age, I realized that the smartest person in the room is not the one with the best answers. The smartest person in the room is the one with the best questions. And how do you get the confidence and the courage and and how do you believe in yourself to be able to ask good questions? And you should never be, my oldest son went through probably 5 or 6 years of school afraid to ask questions because he thought it would make him look stupid. And a lot of people feel like they don't want to ask questions because they're afraid they may not look smart. But actually, when you ask questions, you up-level everybody. When you ask questions, you strengthen the whole group because there's someone else likely in the group that had the same question. So the Socratic method is a very important way of being a more effective communicator. The second is what I call OIVIO. OIVIO. It stands for outside in versus inside out. Outside in versus inside out. And when you think about what that means, is an inside-out communicator, you put them, and visualize this, a megaphone in the middle of a circle of ears. Not very attractive, but a circle of ears. And in the center is the megaphone. The megaphone is what you want people to hear. They're not necessarily listening, but you're building awareness. That's inside-out communications. Outside-in communications is much different. Outside-in communications is you put the ear in the center of the circle, and now you're listening to what the needs of your different stakeholders are. And the most effective communicators in the world are outside-in communicators. The second part I want to talk about is connectivity. And when you think about connectivity, it's the importance of how you connect to those people that are important to you. I don't know of how many of you watch crime television. Every crime television show in Hollywood is produced exactly the same way. And that is what we call DQ. DQ is data, information, knowledge, and understanding. What happens in the first 2 minutes of a crime show? There's a crime. You don't know who got it, you don't know who did it, you don't know why they did it, and you basically don't know anything. In the next 8 minutes, the writers convert the data. Data is always historic. It's what the police find when they arrive at a crime. Data is converted to information. Now you begin to understand who got it. You don't know who did it. And anybody who looks like they did it in the first 10 minutes didn't do it because there's another 40 minutes of show that you have to watch. But then the writers convert the information to knowledge. Now, knowledge is what you have when you get out of college. Knowledge is what you have when you get out of university. But there's one more big step to take, and that is to convert the knowledge to understanding. Understanding is wisdom. Understanding is the application of the knowledge. If you want to be relevant, you have to focus on sharing understanding. Some of you may be familiar with corporations where everyone treats knowledge like currency. If I have it, I'm more valuable than you, and if you acknowledge me that I'm special, I may give you some of this knowledge. But it's a currency. Understanding is about wisdom. And that's what's really important, is understanding that wisdom, and you share wisdom with your friends, you share wisdom with your colleagues, you share wisdom with your boss, now you become relevant. And these are the ingredients of what it takes to become professionally relevant. You're only as relevant as you're trusted. Yeah, I've called myself a trust architect because I realized that reputation, which you hear so much about, reputation, and visualize a tree. The tree is trust. The shadow is reputation. So what happens on a rainy day? What happens on a cloudy day? There's no shadow. The only thing that's of substance, the only thing that exists, the only thing that's relevant is trust. And our jobs is to become most trusted. You want to be the most trusted employee in your company. One way to get there is always make your boss look good. But the reality is you want to be most trusted because trust is really the lubricant, and trust is the currency of the 21st century. We're coming out of a period of enormous distrust. The World Economic Forum for the last 8 years has said the greatest crisis in the world is mistrust and the lack of trust. People listen to people they trust. And this is why when I say the ingredients of being relevant is communication, connectivity, and trust. You know, there's a famous American philosopher, poet, story writer named Mark Twain. And Mark Twain said something very important. He said, if you trust the storyteller, you trust the story. It's the most simple explanation of what trust is all about. If you trust the person who's telling you the story, you're going to trust the story. So when we think about this, I want you to remember this, because this now fast forward from Mark Twain to today. You never trust someone who takes hours to text you. But when you hang up and you meet them later, they're always checking their phone. So you begin to wonder, was my text not that important? So let me just give you some final thoughts, and I think this is maybe where we want to summarize today. People buy from people they trust. It's the most fundamental concept, is people buy from people they trust. They not just buy goods and services, they also buy your advice. They buy your company. They buy the insights that you share with them. So what's really relevant and why trust is so important and how you establish trust, remembering communication, connectivity, and the final ingredient in becoming relevant is trust. People buy from people they trust. It's no different than trust the storyteller and you trust the story. But I think when I'm trying to think about how do I want to conclude today, it's really about you. And it's really about what kind of grit do you have? What kind of resilience do you have? What kind of bounce back ability do you have? Because to be relevant today in that VUCA world, in that world of volatility and uncertainty and complexity and ambiguity, it's not so surprising if sometimes you go to work and you feel a sense of vertigo. You feel like you're a little bit off balance. And I guess the question becomes, what do you do with this conversation today? This conversation that we're having, what do you do with it? And, what's important is just remember this. And I'm a big fan of Carl Jung. I'm not what happened to me. I am what I chose to become. So whatever chapters you've written in your life up to this point, put an exclamation point and say, I'm ready to move on to this next chapter. How do I want to be relevant? Who do I want to be important to? How do I become important to them? How do I wear their shoes? How do I see and understand the challenges that they're facing? I'll give you one idea is every boss I've ever worked for, I probably send them a magazine article or a book title every single day. And the appreciation they have because I'm trying to up-level them. And in up-leveling them, I'm up-leveling everyone around me. So I really want you to leave today and ask yourself, what am I prepared to become? Not what I've been, but what am I prepared to become? And with that, I thank you very much.